Well, hey now, Carpe Diem. I'm actually going to address both of these things. As you know, I use the expression hey now, and some of you who are Grateful Dead fans know that comes from Grateful Dead lore and the cover of Ico. Um, and Carpe Diem, for me, the whole idea of seize the day is both a kind of a philosophy of mine of trying to take advantage of opportunities that present themselves that involve fun, and music tops my list in terms of things that are fun. So I try to, in particular, see live music that I think might be great, and I love trying to get that opportunity to go off and see shows, and kind of a variation on the cliche is a bad evening of music is better than a night of TV. So Carpe Diem, seize the day. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'm not going to show a lot of records. I've just returned from a weekend at the Gorge and Dead and Company, so I want to kind of talk a little bit about that because it was a fantastic couple of days. And even though sometimes people are somewhat pejorative in talking about the band as Dead and Company as a cover band, and I guess technically they are, but they do have members of the Grateful Dead. I was reminded of why I love the legacy of the Grateful Dead and the whole live experience, which is entwined completely with the Grateful Dead experience, and had a kind of a fantastic experience, even though the old body is having a harder time dealing with some of the rigors of a couple days of camping and a whole Grateful Dead, auditory and visual, and just a complete visceral experience. It was fantastic, but I felt beaten up and thrown in the gutter by the end of the weekend. I was tired, but I'll tell you a little bit about that. So yeah, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a few shows that I've seen the last 3 weeks. I've seen 4 shows, 2 of them Dead and Company. One of them is a band called Le Tigre, the Commodore, and another show was Osees at the Commodore. The Commodore being a really great ballroom in Vancouver, and a place where I've seen some great shows. Just a fantastic size. Not unlike the Showbox in Seattle, I guess, in terms of size. And I think the age of the venue as well. But at the end of this, I'm also going to tell you a few concert stories. I guess my Irish heritage is such that I like to tell stories, and so hopefully it doesn't make your eyes glaze over, but I'll tell you a few what I consider to be kind of humorous and fun concert stories. And one of the things to keep in mind with the whole Carpe Diem and the storytelling is I don't think that I'm telling these stories to boast. I know I've had friends accuse me of that, of kind of being boastful of, I got to see this and you didn't get to see it. It's more that it filled me with so much joy, and I want to share that. I want to tell people like, oh my God, this was fantastic. Remember that character from National Lampoon's Animal House? This is going to be so great. And that's how I felt after some of the shows or the experiences that I had. So at the end, I'm going to tell you 2 Rolling Stones concert stories that are basically one story around 2 shows of the two stories about 2 Rolling Stone shows back in the late 80s and early 90s. I'm also going to tell you a Tommy Stinson story of meeting Tommy Stinson of the Replacements, and I always like to tell stories that are embarrassing for me, and this Tommy Stinson story is definitely embarrassing for me. So if you like to see me make a fool of myself, stick around. You'll get some of that. So the 4 concerts. So July 7th and 8th at the Gorge. If you don't know it, it's one of those legendary outdoor venues. Probably Red Rocks is the best known, but the Gorge on the Columbia River in Washington State, southeast of Seattle. It's about a 5-hour drive from Vancouver, across the border, and then down. And before you get to Seattle, you kind of veer off southeast of Seattle, and you get to a place called I think it's either Quincy or George, Washington, kind of almost like villages in Washington State where the Gorge is. Remarkable venue. I'll put up a picture too just to show you, but the pictures don't do it justice. It was smoking hot. It was so hot. I felt like a dog, that had rabies or something at times. I just was like walking around foaming at the mouth, just exhausted. We went down, we camped. That's part of the Grateful Dead experience, certainly. You get that experience of camping and all of the flags and the encampments and people meeting up and strangers talking to strangers and old friends meeting each other and Grateful Dead music blasting out of everything from VW vans and, Mazda Miatas to massive Winnebagos and, just everybody getting their party on. It was really, really fun. And the 2 nights were fantastic. The venue itself is incredible. The scene, as I say, is really incredible. And as my friend Dave said, I've been trying to encourage him to go see Dead and Company. He remembers seeing the Grateful Dead years ago, and I was just saying, you gotta come out and see these guys. They're fantastic. And he finally came, and he declared, of course, he should have been going to see them live before, because that's the way to experience Grateful Dead stuff. By the way, just an aside, I will show this. This just came out, and people are showing unboxing videos. This is the Modest 4 CD, Here Comes Sunshine, June 10th, 1973 at RFK Stadium. Anybody who knows the Grateful Dead, the first song they play is Morning Dew. I mean, it's just kind of like that in itself is just like, oh my God, that's supposed to be an encore. And it is a fantastic live set and 4 CDs, right? And the last of the 4 CDs is a whole set with, I think it's a couple members of Allman Brothers who were playing on the ticket. They joined them for the last set. Dickie Betts and Bush Trucks, I believe. Anyways, I'm really enjoying this. 1973, really an era between 72 to 74 for me is kind of it. Now, their repertoire is so interesting and so varied that I do find different eras of interest at different times. But I love the kind of the space and the diversity of the music. Later on, it seemed to be more of an onslaught, and there was a lot going on. And during this period, I found that there's a lot more. You can hear the nuances, and it's kind of more interesting for my taste. Anyways, so I've been listening to that a lot. But these 2 shows, one of the things about Grateful Dead music, and this is also true for Dead and Company, is that they are able to play, or they encompass many, many different genres, and so in the 2 nights that I saw them, all the different genres are well represented. So you've got like the country kind of aspect and Cumberland blues with the finger picking. You've got, rock with Alabama Getaway, which was fantastic. It was just, and also Dead and Company have been accused of really plodding, like the pace has been really slow. But this particular tour, at least, by the time they hit the Gorge, they were definitely a lot faster, and it was not plodding at all, which was great. Alabama Getaway was great, full on. Psych, the psychedelic rock kind of thing with Dark Stars. A good example of that. They played Dark Star both nights, so I guess they tied the 2 together in the 2 nights. That was really cool. Blues, in this case, Next Time You See Me, which was great. Ballad, closing out of the first night was Black Muddy River, beautiful sort of rock ballad, sung by John Mayer, which is great. But the thing that really hit me when I saw them this time, and what I really enjoyed, is what a groove and funk machine they could be. Hearing them really chugaloo on songs like Loose Lucy, Althea, Mr. Charlie, elements of playing in the band. They got this funk groove, and it was so awesome. With Mr. Charlie, it's got this, great sort of bluesy and funky kind of quality to it, but it permeated a lot of their repertoire. And it was just fantastic. I was up fairly close both nights, especially the second night, and the dancing was frantic. And I love it when you experience kind of losing yourself in music, right? You're just dancing and you're not even thinking about dancing. You're just kind of like, you're sort of barely hanging on from falling on the ground because you're just rocking it out. And they certainly had me up dancing, and it was fantastic. It was really, really good. And so many highlights. All the songs that I mentioned were certainly highlights in the way that they're performed. And one of my all-time favorites, Bird Song, was also spectacular, and they went in lots of really cool directions. And just really good. So that's going to be it for Dead and Company. I mean, there may be other iterations down the road. They've got 3 more shows to close out their tour, and this, of course, the final tour, and they're doing all 3 in San Francisco. And I'm going to be sorry to see them go. Just an institution, really, I guess. And I'm sure there are others that are, maybe creating a new version of that. But it was really, felt timeless to be, on the campground, walking to the venue, and everybody in their tie-dye and just losing their shit, when songs came on. That was so good, I want to thank you for a real good time, Loose Lucy. So that was 2 of my shows over the last 3 weeks. The other one that was also just, this one was a revelation because I didn't have any expectations. I've seen Grateful Dead and Company many times, so I had my expectations. And that was the Osees, or I think they're just called Osees now, out of LA. And Simon, my good friend and kind of musical mentor, I think we mentor each other a little bit, just to, a little prideful on that, but Simon always turns me on to good stuff. And he said, "Oh, Osees, I see the Osees are coming to town." He lives in Australia. "You got to go." And so I started looking at some clips on YouTube, and I just couldn't get into it. It was kind of like, it just seems a little bit too sort of screamy and atonal, and I was having a hard time finding any kind of melody to the music, which I tend to really like. And so I was a little reluctant, and Simon just said, "Just go." And so I got 2 tickets, went with my friend Richard. And there were 2 drums. For those of you who know Osees, you know this already, but 2 drums front and center on the stage. And Richard asked me, "So was is the drummer the singer?" And I'm like, "I don't think so. I didn't notice that from the clips." And then when they came on, that full 2-drummer attack, very different than the Grateful Dead 2-drummer approach. These guys are so powerful, and it creates such an amazing bottom end. And when they would, go into a chorus or go into just kind of like a high point in the song, the explosion of the drums and the power of which they drum together was remarkable. And so, they couldn't be more different than the Grateful Dead or Dead and Company. But the 2 things they had in common were the 2 drummers, and the other one was an audience that was reverential. The audience was so into the show. And the mosh pit reminded me of when I saw Iggy and the Stooges play Bumbershoot, when it was sort of a latter day. It was a reunion of Iggy and the Stooges, and the mosh pit was huge, and it was very aggressive. I got kicked in the head, and my glasses went flying, and I went down for them, and I thought I was done for. I just barely got my body back up, but it was like quite a melee. And this mosh pit was pretty intense, and I loved it, and highly recommend. I don't even know that you necessarily have to really like the music. I think it's just a staggeringly good live show and worth seeing, and I'll be the first one to line up for tickets the next time Osees come to town. So that was the first of the 4 shows. Dead and Company were the last 2. Sandwiched in between was a band called Le Tigre. Don't really know much about them. A friend just said he had an extra ticket and would I like to come? And I came, and I just thought it was remarkably boring. It was, I knew one song, and I thought it was a very catchy song. I don't think to be fair, I don't think I'm the target market, but they had all of their lyrics projected up on the screen, and the lyrics to me seemed like 10% were kind of really interesting, and 90% were like really inane. It was like reading a teenager diary or something like that. It was kind of like, oh, it seemed really, really bad. There was one funny part, which was John Cassavetes, what was it? Genius? Alcoholic? Question mark, question mark. And I thought that was quite funny. And the fact that these fairly young people were fairly familiar with John Cassavetes is pretty impressive in itself. Anyways, Le Tigre was a washout, but you can't love them all. Carpe diem, you got to try. And some of them work out and some of them don't. You never know. Anyways, I'll tell you my rock and roll stories. Probably lost most of you by this point, but here we go. So Rolling Stones, 1989 Steel Wheels tour. The Stones come to Skydome in Toronto. And I had tickets for the first of the two nights, and they were probably the worst tickets in the Skydome. Skydome is where the Toronto Blue Jays play. It used to be called Skydome. And I was just way at the back. And Living Colour were opening up, and they came on, and it was like a machine starting and then a machine shutting down. It was just noisy and it was terrible. And I thought, Jesus, even at that time, I was really reluctant to go to big stadium concerts. I was, tending to go to more kind of small, especially a lot of the punk and new wave bands. I was enjoying seeing them in clubs and stuff like that. So I was just like, oh, this is going to be terrible. And then the Stones came out, and the sound was incredible, and they were incredible, and it was just a fantastic show. So loved it. So I thought, I got to go the next night. So went down to get scalp tickets the next night, and I went down with my roommate, Pam, and we were hanging out front, and absolutely nobody was selling tickets, it seemed like. Everybody who had a ticket wanted to go in. It wasn't even that the tickets that were being scalped were outrageously expensive. There just wasn't anything. Everybody was going into the show. Maybe they'd heard how good the show was the night before. Again, this is December 3rd and 4th, I think, 1989, Steel Wheels tour. So before we give up, we just sort of start wandering around the Skydome. Skydome had just been completed, like it had just been built. It was a new stadium. And we found a door ajar. And so we pulled the door open, and we slipped in, and Pam and I looked at each other like, oh my God, we just got into the Skydome. But we realized that we better not look that way because security, they would see us and know that we're interlopers and they would have us thrown out. So I just said to Pam, just walk straight ahead, don't look at each other. And I started thinking about who do I know who maybe has a connection with the promoters or whatever. And I had a guy's name in my head just in case I needed to say it. But like everything in life, another Carpe Diem thing is you just walk with conviction, like, I belong here. I'm supposed to be here, and come up with some bullshit story in your head about what you're going to tell somebody, We just walked, went down a ramp, and suddenly we were like just at the edge of backstage. We kept walking, and we walked out about, 10 or 12 rows from the front, and we were right in the center in the front. Somebody came over and asked us for our tickets, and we said our friends are off in the concession stand. They've got our tickets. And so they left us alone for a little bit. The lights went out. Pam and I went and saw that second show, and it was amazing. It was like one of those great memories. I mean, it's better than paying. It's better than knowing you're going to go to the show for months. You just, one minute you're thinking that it's all like you're not going to get to see it, and the next minute you have fantastic seats, and it's just like incredible. That's why sometimes breaking the rules can be a lot of fun. So that's my Rolling Stones number one story. Number two story, I told that to my stepson, Ty. Years later, it was the night before his 18th birthday, and the Stones used to rehearse in Toronto before they did their tours. So they were rehearsing in Toronto before doing their tours, and then suddenly they announced that they were going to be playing a club called RPM, holds 1,200 people down by Harbourfront in Toronto. And Ty said, we should go down and try to get tickets. And I'm like, there's no way, there's no way we're going to be able to get tickets. And he goes, well, we go down. So we go down. The tickets are all gone, it's just, but we start milling around the side of the building. And once again, there's somebody in front of, in this case, somebody was in front of us. They knocked on a side door. The door opened up. They gave a name of a person. And then they walked through. They didn't seem to show anything. They just gave the person's name. So the door closed. So Ty and I were just sort of waiting and thought, what the hell? So knocked on the door. I said the same name. and they let us in. And we started walking through. And there were like 2 or 3 kind of security checkpoints. And I just said the name of this person. I can't believe I don't remember the name of this person because it's obviously had a lot of clout. And they kept letting us through until we were on the floor of RPM. And Ty, I remember, it was always very low key, was just flush and just like ecstatic, right? You know, here we were in on the floor of a Rolling Stones show, and we got to see the Rolling Stones play RPM. And I'll put a little set list up there. It was pretty cool. So a couple Carpe Diems there for you on Rolling Stones ones, and then now the embarrassing one. Off to see one of my favorite bands, Skydiggers, in Toronto at the famous El Mocambo. And that night, the Replacements were opening up for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers at, I think, Kingswood Music Theatre. And anyway, so we're watching the Replacements, and lo and behold, Tommy Stinson walks in, and obviously they had finished their show out at the Kingswood. And so he comes up to the bar, and I just walk up to him and I go, "Hey, Tommy, I love your stuff, your music. It's fantastic. Let me get you a beer." And he goes, "Okay." So I ordered 2 beers, and then I realize I have no money on me. I'm completely broke. So Tommy pays for the beers and obviously leaves me at the bar. Doesn't want to have any further conversation. So I call that story the time Tommy Stinson bought me a beer. Anyways, that's it. Sorry for the long-windedness, but been inspired from the live music stuff. And so Carpe Diem, motherfuckers. We'll get back to some vinyl soon.